You are listening to the ReRACEables Podcast. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the ReRACEables Podcast, episode 61. I am joined tonight by Josh and Nicole. Welcome in, everybody.
Thank you.
What's going on?
Tonight, we are here to talk about season 35, episode number 3. And leg number 3 is not over.
I'm going to call this false advertising. I don't like it. Okay. I was promised no non-elimination legs. That's what this was. This was a non-elimination leg.
Big letdown of an episode. Big letdown. Big waste of time, honestly.
Wow. Was it still racing that turned you off so much?
You're playing with my emotions in a way that just feels so let down. You literally are making all of these teams with such big leads and so far apart, and then equalizing it every single second. Stop making this whole thing about this 6-hour delay and difference in flights and who's going to get there and who's going to get there faster, and then make it 15 minutes between every single racer. It's not cool. It's not fun. It's totally making the game not as fun.
So the still racing left a bad taste in my mouth. If I remember correctly, we were not fans of the mega leg.
The mega leg.
Remember that?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
We were not fans really of the mega leg. It was just a longer leg, but they've since ditched the mega leg, which was a good move because it was just kind of stupid. But I agree with you, Nicole. The still racing, it felt like a non-elimination. Now, am I happy about it for the sake of power rankings? Of course. Because Liam and Jeremy and Josh, you had them number 1.
Number 1.
So them coming in last, technically in the non-elimination, but it's not a non-elimination leg. They're still racing. That was a good thing. And my heart can finally stop from stopping, potentially stopping with Jocelyn and Victor's a back-to-back first place, followed up by a near disaster, finishing 10th. So that was one good thing about the still racing. And it did give us the impression, especially with the 90-minute episodes, that we weren't going to have this kind of thing happen.
It's not fun to watch. And what's even more not fun is the end of the episode was like, all right, we're going to try to keep racing. And it was just so, whatever. It turned me off.
Yeah, I have to agree. You kind of want to see someone go home. And it makes you feel like we've made progress.
Yes.
Right? Even if it's a team that you don't want going home, you're like, all right, moving on. We're one step closer to knowing who won.
And it makes the race overall a little less chaotic to follow.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I felt like during the floating market, and we'll talk more about that in a little bit, but at one point I felt like I was completely lost as to where teams were, who completed what. You're only getting the little graphics, but when you knock teams out, now it's only 10 teams that we have to follow. Now it's only 9 teams.
Now, Survivor has this mantra of you never know what's going to happen. The game's going to bring these twists, all sorts of that sort of language, which we don't have on The Amazing Race. Do you think it would have felt more satisfying if the last team arrived and Phil said, you never know what happens on The Amazing Race, so tune in next time because anything can happen? Is that more satisfying? Is that a better ending? Or should this just never be done again?
I think if he does that, he's got to do it in the who's going to come in last, Jocelyn and Victor or Liam and Jeremy. And then it cuts to Phil. And then we're on this cliffhanger of what happened. Then we're not really thinking about, they're still racing.
Mm-hmm.
But then wouldn't that kind of sour it to start the next leg or the next episode? Because then we would be like, wait a minute, there's nobody eliminated? What?
So what I'm saying is, like, in Survivor, we don't have those feelings of like being let down by the contract of every single person gets voted out at the end of the episode. And sometimes there are things that come out, and the reason for it is like the game is bigger than this. And in this, we didn't get any explanation why they're still racing and why the episode ended. It just kind of ended.
But in Survivor, no matter what, there is always a tribal council and someone is always voted out.
Would you want them to say it beforehand?
I don't, there's no reason to have them not get eliminated right now.
I think what's annoying me more is that they said there are no non-elimination legs.
Yeah.
But that's what this was.
Plus the 90-minute episodes, you'd think, okay, 90-minute episode, somebody's eliminated. 90-minute episode, somebody's eliminated. 90-minute episode, somebody's eliminated. And with each episode, you'd go from one country to another. Instead, like, are we spending 2 episodes in Vietnam? Kind of want to see more travel if we can, especially if we're getting back to like old Amazing Race ways. Because I felt like in the last few seasons, it was like 15 countries, 10 cities, or whatever Phil says at the end when the winner is crowned. Like, felt like the numbers were smaller and not because of COVID travel restrictions. So I guess I kind of want to see more places too. And this means we're going to spend another episode in Vietnam, which is cool.
Well, we don't know that.
Well, we're starting there at least.
Yes.
That's what we do.
When you were watching, did you see that the first team arrived and then kept going and said, well, no one's getting eliminated now? Or did you think that this was going to be like a pit stop that kept moving and the last team was still going to get eliminated?
I thought both. When Steve and Anna Leigh finished first, I was like, whoa, we're going to have to talk about it. And we're going to have to talk about it anyway. But like, okay, they came in first and that's a big deal. And then it was like, oh, but they didn't. No prize, no nothing. And then I said, oh, well, somebody's still going to get eliminated, right?
Yeah.
And then nobody did. That was a letdown, in a sense. It was. It's a good point. Well, I guess we're just done talking about this episode. So good night, everyone. No. One thing to change gears that maybe adds to the fuel to this fire here. I thought one key word that I wrote down was patience. I think multiple teams said it at different stages of this leg. Did either of you feel the need to be patient while watching this episode? Whether it was because you felt kind of anxious watching the events unfold, or just knowing like, okay, they need to actually be patient to do this task. Did you feel that as a viewer?
Floating market task wasn't my favorite because it was frustrating to watch. That's what I'm saying. You had to be patient just as a viewer to watch them decide, do we stick around and wait for, the 2 boats to finish unloading their baskets so that we can creep in and be the next boat, or do we move on to the other fruit? And it wasn't the most entertaining thing to watch. Whereas like other challenges, even if they're waiting or deciding or whatever, it's more entertaining. It was kind of like blah.
Yeah, patience and passiveness. Everything was all about passive. It's like run to the place where you have to book your flights. Who's going to be the person that takes their time and figures out which is the best flight to do? Okay, great. Run to the airport. Okay, great. Now we're just going to kind of watch clips of like random clips because it took so long to take off the dragon fruits of this boat. We're going to just wait it out now that we're just waiting for 6 hours for another team to arrive. We're just going to keep waiting it out because they're going to be standing there for a minute every single time they make a rice cake. We're just going to keep watching them try to push the air bubble out of this piece of vinyl. And it's like, this is not exciting. This is not adventurous. It's not fun.
Yeah.
It's passive as a viewer.
I guess as the viewer, you can't help but put yourself into the race and into the teams doing it and making the decisions. You're right, Josh. Everything required you to run, and then stop and be patient. And complete the task at hand, and you had to wait 30 seconds, like you said, for the rice paper to cook, or you had to
hurry up so you can wait.
Yep.
Hurry up so you can wait. And there was also very little where the contestants could really showcase their personalities in this task. It was just very straightforward. These are the steps you have to take. And that was pretty much it. There was no performance piece. There was no
no music,
exhilaration
no
where someone might be scared of something, or someone might be,
overcoming
performing.
some weakness,
No.
or right.
To even push that point, we have a team arrive at the rice paper and it's all full. And instead of going to the other task, they just sit there and are patient and wait for something to open. It's just so not fun to watch.
Yeah, shout out to Lena and Andrea, who literally got there, counted the number of stations, and they had to literally wait. And that was a strategy move.
And you know what? It paid off.
Absolutely.
They were not last.
No, they came in 9th, which is right in the bottom, which they've been hanging around in the bottom feeders. But, being patient, waiting around, using that time to keep watching the demonstration.
Yeah.
Keeps them out of hustling to be last, because they were 9th out of 11. Speaking of impatience and maybe waiting too long, let's talk about Morgan and Lena. They, in the first episode, obtained Josh was showing a note he made with all caps and size 72 font, a mess. We'll get to that in a second. In episode 1, Morgan and Lena won the express pass by eating the plate of bugs and insects and whatever. And the express pass was you could skip one task in any leg up until the end of leg 4, whatever. Yeah. So ultimately, they decided to use the express pass in the floating market to skip over the fruit, the tangerines, dragon fruits, and melons that they had to collect. But Josh, tell us why they were a mess, in your opinion.
My frustration is that they started the task. They got on the boat. They went all the way out there. They realized that they were just not fit for it. And then they used their express pass and still came in 2nd place. It is laughable.
Well, they came in 6th place.
No, they arrived to the boat guy at Pier 20 in 2nd place.
Okay.
How do you use one of the most prized possessions in this game, the only form of strategy, one of the only forms of strategy, and you don't even use it correctly? Oh my God, it just drives me bananas.
I think if they had tried to do the task and were like failing and were really struggling with it, and then they were like really scared that they were going to come in last and then used it, I would understand. But this like middle ground of like starting it, but like not really starting it.
Are we going to use it this leg?
And then using it, it seemed like it didn't give them the last ditch effort to save them, and yet it wasn't a strategy move to really bump them far ahead.
Yes.
They totally fumbled this.
Yeah.
Completely fumbled this. I'd like to think that if any combination of the two of us are on the race, and we have the express pass, the night before leg 3, we're saying to ourselves, are we using it on leg 3 or are we not using it on leg 3?
Yes.
And if the answer is yes, then we're going to walk up to the floating market, tear open the thing, be like, we're using the express pass. And then immediately walked to the detour. We never get on a boat. We never touch a piece of fruit. We never wait on a line to toss fruit to somebody in the Mekong Delta. We don't do any of that. And we save probably what? Hours, if not at least an hour. And we moonwalk to fill for first place.
I also thought that with using the Express Pass, they would just go directly to the
Phil.
pits.
No,
Yeah.
that's fast forward.
Well, I was mistaken.
Well,
clearly.
that's why we're here on the ReRACEables, to re-race it all out and, think back to the episode, and that's what we're here for.
Thank God I have you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Shout out everyone else out there listening. So we're all on the same page with the Express Pass. Total fumble, total mess, disaster. Floating market challenge. While we're there, we talked about how it was all about patience. We talked about the fumbling of the Express Pass usage. Did anything else stand out to you from that?
The grocery store managers struggle with produce. I have that written down.
Jocelyn and Victor, they handled the fruit.
It was not their leg, man.
It was just not their leg. Even though you would think produce,
This
a strength
is
of
the
theirs.
start of their demise. I'm calling it now.
Wow, hot take, folks.
TM.
They've lost momentum. Jocelyn was very negative. She
was.
gave up. She mentally gave up. And her and Victor were bickering.
Yeah.
She was not a supportive partner when he was trying to make those rice papers. And it shows. And we will see it continue into next week, I'm guessing.
Can I say this? And please, if you guys saw this, please jump in here. But does it seem like during the market to you that the teams are either competing harder, or there's just a greater competitive spirit, or maybe there's just a less camaraderie among the teams than in the previous seasons when it wasn't the quote old school Amazing Race situation, because it was that much less competition?
I think what comes to mind when you say this is when the guys didn't get their clue.
Oh my gosh,
Go
yes.
back and just not redo the whole challenge, but they just wanted to go back to the guy to get their picture that
Right.
they
So
needed.
Joe and Ian had completed one of the 3 fruit stands, at the boats, but they forgot to get one of the pieces of the clues from the person at the boat, and they just needed to go back.
Yeah,
and
nobody was letting them in.
Not only
People were like just ignoring them, it seemed.
I would argue the opposite. If I was Joe or Ian, I would have went on their boat and went right to the front and said, "I'm sorry, I just need to get this. Thank you so much," and kept going. And what I saw too was Todd. Todd was like, he's all about camaraderie, right? In the airport, they're always the people gossiping. He was the one giving people high fives. I just felt more passive than gamemanship, which is interesting.
And I wonder the rules too. Like, could Joe and Ian have jumped in the water and swam to that other boat and just done that? Can they get off their boat, jump onto the boat that's in front? I think it was Lena and Andrea's boat.
Yeah.
Like, I need the clue, and I'm not getting off this boat.
You don't ask, like, right? Like, you're not
Right.
gonna
Clue, please.
ask?
Right.
Yeah.
Clue. Like, can you do that, or are you not able to do that?
I would have just done it.
Well, it's hard to know. If somebody from the Amazing Race or a producer or somebody who's super kawacky could really let us know, that would be really helpful, because those little moments, I mean, how long were they sitting there for?
Yeah.
Just waiting for Milena and Andrea to finish tossing up 400 orange tangerines. I mean, that could have killed 15 minutes.
Yeah.
That could have been the difference
If
between
they,
eighth place
you
and
know,
fourth
say
place.
before they get on the boat, like, you need to stay on your own boat.
Right. Or is it written on the clue? I think.
Yeah.
But
Fine print.
But that's a good example of exactly what I was talking about. I feel like there's a little bit more heat, a little bit more competition, a little bit more feistiness here. And I think the claws are maybe not out yet, but they're coming. So speaking of feistiness, let's go to the airport where it all started in this leg. Old school Amazing Race is here. It's back. The players and teams acknowledged it. Did you catch that?
Mm-hmm.
Which was kind of cool. People are going to travel agencies. You're fighting for the best flights.
The best travel agent.
The best travel agent.
Yeah.
But it seemed like the biggest theme of the airport scene into the travel agent scene, like just getting the flights and everything situated, was all about times, whether it was departure times for the different teams. I mean, Jocelyn and Victor departed at 5:24 a.m. Robin and Chelsea were the last team at 9:08. I mean, literally 3 hours and 40 minutes later,
Wow.
they're departing on the same leg. But it was all to get one of what turned out to be 3 flights, which was a 1:45 flight, which got delayed, a 1:50 flight, which left on time, but was kind of a secret, and a 7:55 flight, which presumably would have given at least would have kept a 3-hour lead or more for some teams to others. But once they arrived in Vietnam, there was that race to the docks where there was the 3 time slots. Again, time was the big factor, where it was either a 5:45 time slot to get on the boats to the floating market, a 6 o'clock, or a 6:15. Your thoughts about the times and how that kind of dictates things, but not quite enough. In other words, the teams who departed first got to the travel agencies first, got to book a flight first, but in the end, their 3-hour lead, whether it was at the start, at the flight, became 15 minutes or a half hour. Is that fair? Is that right? I know, Josh, you mentioned it a little bit earlier. Like, what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, just echoing what I said earlier, this hurry up and wait equalizer. You get so invested in these people and the race itself, and then it seemed like it happened multiple times in this episode that it was just like, oh, okay, why did I just watch the last 20 minutes? And why was I invested in that if they're all just going to be back at the same point at the same time?
But they also have to do these. First of all, because of production, right? They can't just let a team run away with it and be like days ahead of people, right? But also,
They could. How good of TV that would become?
right?
We don't know.
That was my next point of you had to keep it exciting. They have to every now and then have these checkpoints where you're keeping teams within reach of each other. Otherwise, it wouldn't be entertaining to watch.
I'm not arguing checkpoints, but good TV is not hurry up and wait. It's not running to a flight, making the flight, and then running off of the flight, and then going to bed on these very cool buses, and then running off the buses, and then getting a time slot. And then, like, that's not good TV. I don't mind the checkpoints, but when you have this like running to nothing, it's where it's a complete letdown.
Let's say it was 5:45, 6:45, 7:45. Would that have landed better?
I think so.
I think it's still kind of the same thing. I think you want to see action. You want to see travel. You want to see movement. You want to see doing things. You want to see action. And we didn't really get much action.
There was only so many flights from Thailand to Vietnam. There was only so many buses that you could have possibly gotten on to get to Con Tho, I think is how you say it. And the dock only opens at 5:45. That's when it opens. It's not a 24. The world is not 24/7 with every single activity. So there's going to be times where you just like run into this logistically, and maybe it's by design. It probably is, but maybe it's also just kind of the nature of a business that they're relying on doesn't open until a certain time. Anything stand out about how Steve and Anna were able to pick up the extra 5:45 spot? We're learning more about this team, who we had overall ranked
I'm
the
impressed.
lowest.
I'm more and more impressed with them, especially Anna Leigh.
Texas Heat, baby.
Yeah, the fact that she didn't just settle on it's the paper, the next paper I can take, that's what I'm going to take. No, she made sure to really thoroughly look that she was getting the one with the best time, and it paid off for her.
Yeah, it really set a tone for them to jump up, not only because they were on the 7:55, the late flight and the early bus where they had no sleep, but it really gave them a boost of confidence and just moving up and passing teams. And instead of being in the 6:15 or the 6 o'clock, boom, they're now tied for first, essentially, to start the floating market.
I wrote, am I a fan of Anna Leigh? I thought it was great gameplay, great strategy. I did have a little bit of issue with it because I didn't know if it was like accidentally put there by another team or if this was more of like the producers getting involved. And I think that's probably why I get so annoyed at these checkpoints is like, these are all out of the control of the team, right? Because you want to see them race and you want to see the good teams that are racing do well. And when you have these like arbitrary barriers that is imposed by producers or the game itself, then it is a little disappointing because it's not in their control anymore.
So you're saying like, a team gets there first, they should be able to grab the 5:45 because they had raced to that point instead of like, did they put a 5:45? They put 3 of them in the left column or the left holder, but 1 in the right one. So you had
That's what it seemed like that happened. I don't think another team put it back in the wrong thing. Why would they put it back?
So is that like just like a cheap?
Yes.
I feel cheap.
Yes. It's cheap. It's cheap.
I agree. I think it's kind of cheap. But yes, it is. But again, somebody had to figure it out.
They were the ones to look and get it.
It's not a surprise that Anna Leigh is the one who found it. Early MVP. Go ahead, Josh.
I want to conversely say something. I wrote this down because I thought it was interesting. The Corey and Rob, they arrived second to the travel agency and second to Victor and Jocelyn. And what they walked in and said, we want the same flight as them. They didn't even say what's the quickest flight, what's the shortest flight, what's this flight. And I think this is now starting to see maybe what is it called? This is starting to see maybe that they aren't the strongest team on the race. They do have some impairments. They do have some faults that perhaps the opposite of Anna Leigh, where Anna Leigh is like trying to look for the best thing, trying to always question everything, and they're acting in a different way. It is interesting to see both sides.
Yeah, because the race is a race of inches.
Yeah.
Right? It's a race of inches, and these little details, right? These little, we're going to use the express pass, but not immediately. We're going to get on the boat first and waste 45 minutes or whatever it could have been. Like that's a detail that you miss and you got wrong, and now you're in 6th place at the end of the episode, Morgan and Lena, instead of 1st place.
Yeah.
Anna Leigh and Steve, boom, they nail the detail. They skip over people, and they find themselves in the 1st group, not the 2nd or the 3rd group, right? Rob and Corey, like you're saying, I think that's another thing to kind of put your finger on and say, is this more telling about that team? And a couple other teams did it as well.
Yeah.
And even the travel agents themselves kind of played a role in kind of knowing like, here comes another team with color-coded shirts and these yellow envelopes. I guess we're doing this. But yet there was a best travel agent.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, is that fair? Is that just the luck of the draw? Where do we stand on that?
That's how the world works.
Yeah.
That's how the race works.
So you got to find the travel agent with the fewest teeth.
Yes.
That guy was the hustler.
That was.
He found the 150 flight.
Yep.
Which was the ticket for Joel and Garrett. And
yes.
Who was the other one on the 150 flight? It was Joel and Garrett, and it was Joe and Ian to leapfrog from the back of the pack to the front of the pack, but only Joel and Garrett were able to maintain being in the front. Last thing, can we talk about Vietnam a little bit? I've been to Vietnam, and it really is a testament to like how well you can manage complete chaos, because the motorbikes are literally going in every direction. Those boats are all over the place. People are zooming around all around on them. Fruit is literally flying, and they're dumping it it's falling into the water, and people are scooping it out, and all of that is very real. The show in part is a lens into seeing the world, right? So what were your thoughts about Vietnam?
High anxiety. It's the whole like family on a motorbike, zooming past people everywhere. It's a little bit similar to India in that there's just so many people and everyone's trying to get somewhere.
Chaos.
But not quite to the extent of India.
No.
But it just was giving me those vibes.
And being there and being on those motorbikes and seeing a family of 5 literally on a motorbike is just wild. Crazy, but that's what they do. Josh?
Not much to add. I did think it was beautiful, and echoing what Nicole said, I just didn't feel like we quite captured the culture. I think that maybe what you were saying about the competitive nature, I don't know if they like lived in and was like, wow, we're on this river right now, or wow, imagine what it would be like to, when they sometimes like land and they're like putting themselves in the shoes of the people who live there. We never really saw that, even in the 90-minute episode.
Do they make rice paper? Yes, great. Like that's great. Like that's definitely a part of their culture, and motorbikes, and I guess they wrap them with vinyl, but not really
well, they
part of the
couldn't
culture.
let them ride the motorbikes necessarily because too dangerous, too hard to get the camera person following them and whatever. So they had them involve the motorbike in the production of the motorbike.
But let me tell you something. Having been on a motorbike in Vietnam, in Ho Chi Minh City, it's a freaking experience. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Not just because you're at high speeds on a highway on a motorbike, but like everybody's on them and literally driving every direction on every road. And it's just no holds barred chaos that, as an American, like being there, it was a total culture shock. And I wish that you got to spend a little bit of time on the motorbikes in the streets traveling that way, because that is, like Josh was saying, like they missed on the cultural experience. That's what it's like to be there. So maybe they will next episode, but let's finish up here with the detour. Speaking of that, we had paper or plastic. We talked about it a little bit. With rice paper, you had to pour the liquid, make it for 30 seconds, pick it up with this wicker torch thingy, not sure what that was, and make 12 of them. Or you had to cut, apply heat, and smooth out vinyl on one body part of a motorbike with no bubbles. Was there a clear, better choice here? I know we ask this every week. Was there a better choice?
I think having read it, like reading the clue on paper, it sounds like the motorbike would have been easier, but I think the rice paper was actually easier.
I wrote down that I would have done the paper when I first heard it. I still think the paper was easier, but I actually think I would have been okay at the motorbike because I have done that sort of stuff in theater, stretching drops and attaching things. But I think the paper was definitely easier. Actually, I think it's safe to say that after watching the episode, the paper was the better option.
Yeah.
See, I'm still up in the air. I'm torn between having to make 12 of them it seemed like there was a learning curve, and perhaps in both there was a learning curve, maybe a bigger learning curve in the vinyl, but
it also seemed like once you nailed one, you got in the flow, and then like 12, you just spit out.
I agree. I think it would have been more frustrating to stretch the vinyl. Like, I think it was Joe and Ian. Oh, it's lighter now. We need a different color. And you would have had those kind of details. But I think it would have been hard to, in that moment, adrenaline pumping, which one do we do? 12 of these, one of these. But in the end, I think you guys are right. I think the rice paper was the easier one.
I clocked that. I really like Rob and Corey. I just keep gravitating towards them every episode. And I loved that they stopped and they watched the instruction, and they even said to themselves 12 times that you have to spin the ladle, and then you wait for 25 seconds exactly. Just that level of detail orientation is so powerful for me. I think that's a really, really valuable thing on this race, especially this season. We haven't really seen any real physical tasks. It's been very detail oriented. I think that's been interesting as well.
Are we crossing the finish line?
Nicole crossed the finish line.
I'm going to cross the finish line with out of towners. Out of towners. Billy Johns. I just love that they have to declare that they are out of towners when they couldn't look more like out of towners. I just find them funny. And I captured a wonderful picture of them this episode where what's her name?
Milena.
Melena's eyes look like they are about to pop right out of her eye sockets.
Well, that's what happens when you learn there's only 5 rice paper stations, and you're team number 6. So shout out Milena and Andrea. We would have probably done the same.
They're out of towners. What do they know?
I'll cross the finish line with this. I think in a game of inches, especially with non-elimination legs, but we have a still racing leg, it gives people a second chance. And I don't think you want to give teams like a Jocelyn and Victor a second chance. I don't think you want to give teams like Liam and Jeremy necessarily a second chance. But I will tell you one team that will not get a second chance is Morgan and Lena, and that is to do their express pass. And I think that was such a missed opportunity.
Yeah.
Especially now in a still racing leg of the race where first place would have looked a lot better than being in 6th place. Just a really, really poor judgment by them. And all these little details, like Josh said with Rob and Corey, the number of times that the rice paper and then the amount of seconds, like that attention to detail has been so big for so many teams, pretty much every challenge.
Yeah.
And only one team has had a real advantage, the express pass. Maybe it doesn't bite them at the end of episode 4, but hot take, they're only going to have themselves to blame in their lack of preparation or maybe their lack of communication. We will stop there. Thank you to Josh. Thank you to Nicole for being here tonight on the ReRACEables Podcast, episode 61. I can't believe we've done 61 of these. That's pretty awesome.
Wow.
No power rankings changes as a result of there's no eliminations. So Josh remains in first place with 71 points. Congrats, Josh, on holding that for another episode. Be sure to check out tribalcouncilblog.com, where we'll be covering Survivor with my blog all season long. Be sure to check that out. We'll be posting for episode 3 later this week. Also, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe on Instagram and on our YouTube channel. Check that out. Type in Tribal Council Blog or the ReRACEables Podcast. You should be able to find all of our episodes from this season and our archives from previous seasons of The Amazing Race and Survivor. Thanks, everybody. We will see you next week for episode 4.